Hey guys, it's Lyndon, and today we're doing something totally different. We're going to do a Photoshop tutorial, starting from the absolute beginning, the very, very basics, and then we're going to slowly work our way up from there. And so today's tutorial is probably going to be a little bit more on the boring side, but I think it's super important because I have taken classes that didn't go over all of this stuff, and I was kind of left at a disadvantage because of that. And so I want to give you the chance to have basically everything that you need to know to get started and do the projects that you want to do. If you're looking for a free program, I was thinking about doing something with GIMP, so make sure you leave a comment down below, or you can send me an email and I'll put that on the screen, and then just let me know of any ideas that you have. If you want to learn something specific, we can go over free Photoshop, we can go over cheap Photoshop, we can go over video editing, things like that. So just, send me a message and we can work on that. So this time I'm going to go over the toolbars with you. There's a toolbar that has all of your tools on the left-hand side. We're going to work on that and then probably do a project in the next tutorial. And so I really think that you should watch this because it is going to be a little bit long. I'll try to help by putting timestamps in the description so that you can skip ahead and skip back and forth or whatever. If you need to go off and do something, you can always come back later. But I think it is just knowledge that you need to have to even be able to execute any ideas that you might want to execute in the future. So that is that, and let's get started. So the first things first, if we go to create new here, it's going to ask us to create a new document, and it's going to give you a lot of different confusing options and tabs. I don't want to focus on that right now because this is a very long section. I could probably do like a 5 to 10 minute tutorial just on this, and so to save time, we're actually going to ignore that. In the description, I will have an image for you to download, so try to download that image, and then we're going to open it right here. So if you go to open and you find the file, in this case I just have it named camera right here, and we're going to open that. If you're working on photos, that is going to be your best bet. You want to do that so that the document is the exact details that you need for that photo. I don't know why, but doing this tutorial makes me super nervous. If you go to the window up here, the little window tab, and you check your workspace, I'm going to be working out of Essentials default. You should be doing the same. It should already be set to that because it is the default. That's why that is saying that. But if you click on photography or any of these other ones, it's going to change your workspace for motion graphics, for digital painting, for photography, or whatever else it may be. We're going to stick to Essentials because it has all of the tools that we need right where we need them. And then we're going to primarily be focusing on this left toolbar over here. This is what the entire tutorial is about. One other thing, we're going to go over to our layers down here, and our background, we're just going to click on this little lock, and that's going to unlock our background and turn it into a layer. If you have something locked, typically you can't do anything at all to it. So if I lock that, then I can't erase it. Now it's suddenly working. I can't draw on it with a brush or anything. And so, yep, we're going to unlock that, and then we can do anything that we want. Our first tool is going to be the Move tool up here. So if you right click on any of these that have the little arrow next to them, or if you hold left click and hover over, it will give you the options. And if you just hover over them, it will give you a little description with the shortcut that you need. So in this case, we're not going to go through the descriptions because I'm going to talk about them. But the Move tool, it will have this little checkbox unchecked. And so at its basic, it'll just allow you, gosh, that is being really annoying. It will allow you to drag your layer around and move it like so, and Control Z to undo that and move it back. If you click Show Transform Controls, then it will allow you to resize it and rotate it and do things like that. You can hit Enter to set that in stone, or you can hit Escape to undo that. You can also go up here and hit these little this little no symbol or the check mark, and that'll allow you to do it that way, which is pretty awesome. After the Move tool is the Artboard tool. So in the same section, there's Artboard. You can draw. It's basically, this is one piece of paper. You can add another piece of paper to your file, and then at the end of it all, you can save them as individual files, like having 2 individual pieces of paper. So it just basically shares your workspace, so you don't have to have a bunch of different windows open, but you do have different artboards. That can be really handy if you're working on icons and doing like a set of icons and you want to have each one in a little individual square. That's what I do it. That's what I use it for in a different program, and that's probably what you would use it for in Photoshop too. Web pages, you could do multiple web pages on one document. That way when you're sharing it with people, it's much easier. Keep on going. All right, now we have the Marquee Tool. So this is the rectangular marquee, and yeah, it's gonna select things for you. So you can do a rectangle. If you hold Shift, then it'll make a square. If you hold Alt, then on Control D is going to deselect anything that you have, just so you know. If you hold Alt, then it's gonna expand out from the center of your point. And if you hold Shift and Alt, then it'll do that with a square. And that you can do, I mean, I did Control Z to go back a step and not select it, but Control D is also the best way. And if you forget, you can always go to Select up here, and then Deselect will show the shortcut and also deselect it for you. We're going to talk about these little things in a moment. Those, when we get to the Lasso Tool, I will explain these, and that will, yeah, it just is a better time to explain it once we get there. The circle, the ellipse, what is it? The elliptical marquee tool. Yeah, it's the same thing, but with ovals and circles, you know, and that's it. And then the single row, if I click on that, the same goes for the single column. If I click here, you see there's one line that's going straight up, and it seems like it's not doing anything, but if I zoom in here, it's actually doing a single pixel. And so this is a single pixel wide, and the row is a single pixel tall. Not sure what that's useful for, but that is what it is. I'm just here to explain the tool so that you know what everything does. All right, now we got the Lasso Tool. Okay, so the Lasso Tool, this is like a free-form selection, so you can draw over there. With this first little square checked, it'll let me have one selection at a time. With the second square checked, it'll let me add to that selection, and so I can add another one over here. I can combine these two, and that will just help me tweak and refine whatever my image is. The next one is the subtract, so that is the same deal, except it subtracts it. So if I do that, then I will do anything. And I'm left clicking, like I'm letting go way over here. So if I start here and then I let go all the way down here, it'll actually connect all the way back. It'll draw a straight line to connect it. So that can save you a lot of time. You don't always have to go and try to find it again. Just come up here, boop, and then boop. That's how that works. This is the intersecting kind of selection. So whenever you draw through it, it will only select the intersecting part of those two selections, as you can see right here, and it loses everything else, and then it's only that. So I started from here, and then it just turned it into this. Yep, Polygon Lasso Tool. So if I'm selecting a building, I click, and then I click, and I click, and it is just doing straight lines wherever I'm clicking. So click up here, click over here, 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 here. And eventually I could go all around the building and select all of that. The magnetic lasso tool, and I'll again talk about more of these settings later on as we start using them. I'll talk about feathering, I'll talk about the contrast little percentage and stuff, but right now you don't really need to know that. You just need to know exactly what these tools are doing, because I have run into the problem where when I was taking classes, my teacher didn't know how a tool worked, and so she didn't tell me. And then when I had my first job, it was with my brother, but he was like, hey, do you know how to use the slice tool? And I said, no one ever taught me that, which was a bummer, because then he was like, well, now I have to teach you and you're supposed to know this. So that is why we're talking about it quickly right now. The magnetic lasso tool. And so your default is probably going to be 50 up here in the frequency. You can see the frequency right up in this area. So when you click and you move, it is going to try to magnetize to the colors that you are selecting pretty much. It'll try to find that edge and predict what you are selecting. If you change the frequency, the higher the frequency, the more these little squares show up and the more refined it's going to be. So now you'll see that that corner was taken a lot more gracefully and all of these edges. You do have to find your connecting point to reconnect it. And so unlike the other one where you were just able to click and then let it go, this one you have to go back and you'll see a little circle over here. I guess it's kind of hard to see. A little circle, and you can click on that and it will reconnect those 2 points for you. That is it for the lasso tool. All right, now we have the magic wand. This is also going to select things. You'll know notice that a lot of Photoshop's tools are used for selections because that's mostly what you're doing in here. And so our next tutorial is actually going to be talking about masks because that is the best way to work non-destructively. That's also something that I'm really going to try to focus on is not destructive creation, but non-destructive creation, because anyone can brute force their way into doing something, but it's being able to do that effectively and efficiently so that you can always tweak it and go back without destroying all of your work. Because that, if you're doing it in a professional setting, that's what people want to see. They want to see that if they ask you to tweak something, you can do it without needing to restart your entire project. Okay, the magic wand right there. So I hold Alt in the scroll wheel to zoom in and out, and you can press Z and it'll bring up the zoom tool, which is all the way down here. We'll kind of skip that. This is the magnifying glass. And so if you right or left click, it'll zoom in, and right click doesn't do anything actually. I mean, it does, but not what you want. If you hold Alt and left click, then that will zoom out, or alternatively, you can hold Alt and then use the scroll wheel. And then instead of going to this hand tool down here, you can just use the space bar from any tool and drag around with left click. Probably should have talked about that earlier. Okay, back to the magic wand. So we have our magic wand here. Nope, just kidding. We have our object selection tool. We'll start with that. The object selection tool, sorry. If you drag over something, then it'll try to select that object. If I drag over this trash can and this bench, it'll try to select the trash can and that bench. If I drag over this stop sign, this is not a great example because this image is really busy, but it will try to select this stop sign. And if I drag over this building, it will attempt to select the building because it's thinking that's what I'm trying to select. The quick selection tool, if I'm dragging over here, it'll try to find the edges of whatever I'm selecting. And so you'll see that it's a little bit clunky around all of it, but when I let go of my left click, it tries to tidy it up. And again, I mean, none of this is going to be perfect, but it is just to help you work more efficiently. And so you can do the quick selection, and then you can switch to your lasso tool and use the subtraction thing and refine your edges by like deselecting that area. They can be used in tandem with each other, just so you know. So that is the quick selection. Control D to deselect that. Get a little sip of coffee. Okay, magic wand. The magic wand, it will try to select a whatever color you're selecting, a chunk of it. And so here we have this, and because, let's see, contiguous, that box will be checked, and that means that it's not going to try to pass a certain point. And so it's got this, like, once the white starts and there's no more of that blue that I selected, then it just cuts it off and it doesn't go any further. Nothing outside of that area is selected on the image, but if I uncheck that, then it'll try to select everywhere from the image. And so these stop signs are selected, this part in the window is selected. And so that checkbox can be very dangerous, because if I just did something crazy like delete everything, then you'll see that I removed chunks of the image, just like I removed this entire chunk of the sky. That is not the way to do it. Tolerance, if you do same thing, if you do 100, then it'll be more generous with what it's selecting. And if you do something like 10, then it'll be very unforgiving and just really try to select that blue that I was clicking on. That's what that does. Now we are at the crop tool. So the crop tool, it will attempt to crop, well, it will crop the image. If I drag this down and I hit enter, or I hit this checkbox, this is the image now. It is condensed, it's cropped. If I do any more layers and I try to draw on it or anything, when I save this file, it is going to look like this. And that's probably not what you're wanting. So it can be useful to cut down your artboard, but if you're not trying to cut down your artboard, then you don't want to use the crop tool to crop certain parts of your image, just so you know. Let's see. So that's the crop tool, perspective crop, and there are, again, other things over there, but we won't worry about that. perspective crop if I drag it over this building and then I try to kind of tweak it and adjust it to the building right here. Then when I hit enter, it will attempt to kind of take away that perspective and put the building kind of face forward. It doesn't really work in this situation, but if I had a skyscraper, imagine that you're trying to take a picture of a really tall building, and so you're starting off really low, then it can be really handy for that because it will actually work some like pretty crazy magic and end up turning that skyscraper and make it look like you almost took the picture from the front face of the building. Pretty cool stuff. The slice tool, we talked about this earlier. Yeah, so this is for if you're doing web development and web design. When you cut it up, you cut this up into chunks. So just like it's really hard to eat and digest food, if you take really huge bites, this cuts it up into little chunks for your website. And so it'll try to load this part of the image and then load this part of the image and this one and then this one. And it won't try to do some like really heavy lifting. So if you had like a logo in the center here, then you could load your logo first before you start loading all of the other chunks. And then the next one is the slice select, which just selects these different numbered slices that you have in your image. And you can go up, I don't know actually how to, let's see, can we clear it from here? Well, you can undo if you want, but even if you undo, you're still going to have this little thing right up here. And so if you go to view and then show and tap on slices down here, that will get rid of that little box and then just quickly get out of that tool because it's going to be pretty annoying. The frame tool, again, if you're doing web development, then this will put a little frame with an X through it, and that is just telling somebody that they need to put a picture there. It's basically like, this is a placeholder, put some sort of stock photo or whatever photo that you have, and it'll kind of put it into that frame. So it helps with communication and talking to people about that stuff. The eyedropper tool, boom, 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 boom. We're going straight through all of this. The eyedropper. If you left click, it will select the color. If you hold Alt and left click, then it will select your background color. So this down here, this is the foreground color, and you can click on it and change it that way. This is your background color, and you can change it that way. And then you can also select these arrows to swap between the two. You can tap X on your keyboard to swap between the two. And yeah, and so if you're using your eyedropper, then selecting the foreground, hold Alt, and then you can select your background, and that is as handy as it can be. If you're using like a brush, you can easily swap between the two. Yep, 3D material dropper tool. You can work with 3D objects in this, and sometimes it's handy. I'm not much of an artist, so one time I did a photo where I had my arm chopped off, and to get the perspective perfectly right of my forearm so that I could fill it in with all this fleshy stuff, then I actually just used a 3D cylinder and I put it into my space. That way I just had it perfect and it looked amazing. But if I had a material on that, then I could pick up that material with this 3D material eyedropper. But we don't have an example for that right now. Color sampler, if I tapped on different parts of the screen and I was like, whoa, I want to do a theme that is like downtown Globe themed, and like we have these cool colors of the sky and the brick and like these other beigey buildings. Every time I click, it's actually putting number one, number two, these three different colors that I have. And if I were going through here, you'll see that's the red, green, and the blue value. And so red, green, and blue right down here. I could type in, if I'm going for number 3, which is actually number 2, which is the brick, then I'd go for like red is 179 and green is 98 and blue is 69. And then click enter, and that gives me that bricky color so that I can do whatever I want with it. Yep, and then you can hit clear all up here to get rid of all of those little example samples. Boom, ruler tool. Click from one point to another and it'll tell you how many like pixels that width is. And so I'm not sure what that's helpful for, but you know, you could find a use for it during something and it would just show up right over here. Same thing, clear right up there to get rid of the ruler. The note tool, if I could click over around, then it will create different notes for people to know, hey, put this here. Hey, this looks a little funky. Should I keep it? Whatever that may be, when you send the file, the notes will transfer over with that file. Count tool, 1, 2, 3, 4. It just counts on things. And again, same thing. It's just for communication. If you need to, for some reason, you'll be like, hey, check out number 1. Is that looking okay? Combine it with the note. Next up, we have our healing brush tool. So if I'm gonna, let's zoom in. Again, you can use Z, or you can hold Alt and scroll, or you can do a 2-finger scroll. I don't even know if you have to hold Alt when you're on the trackpad. Anyway, we're gonna go into the CVS Pharmacy kind of bit. And so the healing brush tool, this is for any of your like blemishes or just general things that are like really small cover-ups, but on like a skin tone that's like just something that's all one tone. So if I do this, then it'll try to auto cover it up and auto heal that area. Doesn't like super work well with what I'm doing here, but this is perfect for our example. And then the type, we'll worry about that another time. So that's the spot healing brush tool. It will just do it right there automatically. The healing brush tool itself, if you hold Alt, then left click, it will select a region for you, and then you can paste over that other thing. And so you'll see that like, and this is a very quick and rough example, but this one, you kind of lose all of those lines and you lose some of the detail because it's just trying to auto fill it in, but you can be a little bit more specific and refined with it by using a different tool, depending on what you need. And then the patch tool, if I am dragging over here and I try to move this, then it will try to patch it with whatever my selection is over whatever I moved. And so if I do the windows, it does that. If I do this, it does another CVS Pharmacy, or it tries to do that, which is, you know, it is what it is. Content aware move tool. So if I do this and then I move this over, it will not only try to move CVS Pharmacy and make it look like it belongs in another place, but it'll try to autofill in the gap that I'm leaving behind. So you can hit enter, or you can hit this check mark, and that will autofill that gap and attempt to move your selection. And red eye removal tool. So if you use flash and you take a picture of someone with blue eyes and then they have red eyes, which has happened to me a lot in my life, then you can use that little fancy tool. Uh-oh, did I lose it? Red eye tool. And just click and it will turn their eyes into black eyes, because that's what they want, I think. Anyway, it'll fix it up. I don't know if that has any other uses beyond red eye removal, but that's why Photoshop is for photos. All right, after that, brush tool. Okay, so you hit the brush tool and you can do this and you can draw all over your image. Right now we are on this layer. If I go to erase it with the eraser, you'll notice that I'm erasing the photo at the same time. This checker is it's the transparent background, and so it means that there's nothing behind it. If I save that image, there's just going to be a clear hole in the middle of it. So if I was using the brush tool, if I were using the brush tool, then I would want to use a different layer. I would click on this plus over here, create a new layer, and then I could erase just that layer, which would save my image in the background. After the brush is the pencil tool. It is the brush tool, except it's a pencil, and I'm not sure the difference. I just find that this one always looks worse, but there has to be some sort of use for it. I've just never used it. So I won't talk about it any further than that because I'm not sure what its uses are. Color replacement tool. If I draw on this building, it will try to use my foreground color it'll just try to replace the building with that foreground color. And try to do it in a more like a realistic way. It's not just brushing over it, but it's actually trying to change the color of it as best as it can. So that is that. And then the mixer brush tool, if I have a, let's see, get a really good yellow color there, and then I have a blue color, then this one, oh, by the way, this little mark, that is showing compatibility with the printer. So if there's warning out of gamut for printer. So if you click on this, it'll take it to a printer friendly color. That way it'll actually show up in the printed image as you are seeing it on your screen. So I'm okay using this for like something I'm putting online, but this color would not be okay to print. So it's going to change it over here to something that's as similar as it can be. Anyway, so if I were using the mixer brush over here, and I'm going to do a new layer, and so I'm drawing some blue, and then you'll see that I also have yellow. Well, if I take my blue brush and I mix it in with this yellow, then eventually it will try to make it green. It tries to do like an actual paint effect and mix those two colors together. So that is the purpose of, yeah, that. It works all right. Probably really good for digital painting and stuff like that. The clone stamp tool. So if I hold Alt again and I'm like, I'm gonna stamp this. Whoops, I lost my tool. Hold Alt, select a region, and then it will not try to blend it in. It will just stamp that on another part of the image, and it'll actually, if you start stamping, it will follow the cursor follows it along. And so the best way to explain that is if I like stamp down here and then I move it over here. As I move up, it'll start stamping the entire stop sign in. And then, yeah, there you go. That's a perfect Photoshop. And that's basically how it's done. It's super easy. Then there's a pattern stamp tool, which I'm going to actually have to learn about this more because I'm not entirely sure what this does, but it might do something really cool. But if you select any of these patterns up here from this little box, then as you draw around, it will just stamp that pattern onto your image. And it doesn't sound extremely useful to me, but I'm sure there has to be a way for it to be useful. That is that. Next up, history brush tool. So let's say like earlier, you were drawing your brush on this image, and this is the mixer brush, and you're drawing around, and then you're like, oh no, I put it on my picture and I erased it, and like I can't get back because I don't know, I made a mistake. The history brush tool will try to take that part of the image and put it back to a previous state. There you go. So now the brush is gone and it didn't mess up that layer. The reason why I told you to just make a new layer before is because I'm not sure if that's 100%. I'm not sure if the previous state is where that photo originally started, or if it might actually be like if the previous state at some point would just be this color being on here. And so you'll notice that it even works with eraser and stuff. It'll take all of that back. So it can be handy, but I'm not sure if you should rely on that. I think there are other ways to work that are smarter than that. History brush tool, same thing. It takes like the previous state of the image and it actually uses it as a brush. And I'm not sure how handy that is, but it can come up with some like pretty funky abstract things going on here. You could probably make like a portal in the middle of the town that looks all funky. Yeah, that's what that's done with. Eraser. There you go. You erase things. This and all the other brushes, they have, if you right click, or you can see some stuff up here in this menu, but they have a hardness value that you can change. So at 100, it has a very clear, distinct outline, and at 0, it is very fogged up, and it kind of tries to blend it a little bit more. And another way to probably see that is if I like fill this background, you can see that the blue is kind of transparent all over there. And yeah, so that's what that does. That's the eraser tool. Background eraser, it like will try to just erase the background. It'll try to auto detect it. So if I'm going along and I'm doing like a rough job on these buildings, then it'll try to figure it all out. I mean, it makes mistakes sometimes. It's not perfect, and it will do that little transparent effect that I just showed with the color. So you do have to be careful with it, but it can come in handy depending on your situation. This is like the photo of the city is one thing, but like a photo of a portrait of somebody, it might be a lot easier to use the background tool for something like that. Magic eraser, it's like the magic wand, except it erases everything. It takes that color and it uses your tolerance and stuff, and it will just full on erase that color from the image. Pretty nifty. The gradient tool. So the gradient tool, as is, if I did that, let's do a black and yeah, sure. Well, let's do yellow. That's what that looks like. And there are these 4 little things over here that change the way that it looks. You can do circles, you can do a little radar blip, you can do a little this, and you can do a little bit of that. And so right now you might be like, hey, that doesn't sound useful at all whatsoever. But if I did, sure, yellow, if I did a yellow over here, and then I did a blue over on this side, and then I turn this layer over to screen, and I turn this layer to screen. Screen is taken out. It's making taking the darkest pixels and making them transparent, pretty much. Then I get this little funky effect going on, and I'm like, oh, whoa, that's kind of neat. Yeah, so it's not useless on the surface. You might be like, that seems like I can't do anything with it. but you can definitely do some things with it. If I imagine this was yellow and I had this lantern and I put screen on there, oops, didn't even do it on a new layer. My bad. And then I did screen, then you got like a little lensy kind of effect going on, which can be cool. Yep, paint bucket takes a color, tries to fill it in with a different color, and yellow probably is a really good example for this one, but it just tries to fill in the sky with blue. And again, tolerance, boom, bump that up to 100. Oh, it tries to fill in everything, everywhere, boom, check that box. All right, it tries to not do that. That was already yellow. Haha. Anyway, 3D material drop tool. Let's keep going. If I had the eyedropper and I took a 3D material and then I would use this paint bucket to put it in that 3D object, that's how that works. Blur tool. I'm going to zoom in here. This is just going to blur up my image. It does not work like the, well, actually, does it work like the brush? I can't blur from a different layer unless I select sample all layers, and then I will blur everything, but, oops. And then I'm guessing it should, oh yeah, you could erase it if it was on a new layer. But if you do blur on like this one layer, and then that's not blur. Doesn't actually have, oh, just kidding. Is it actually O? I think I did that. I changed it to O, but normally it won't have a shortcut to it. And we'll talk about that later. Yeah, you can blur it, and erasing it's just gonna erase it like the image. There's a better way to blur things than using that tool all the time. Sharpen tool. Don't use the sharpen tool to try to get rid of a blur. That's not going to do anything. But the sharpen is going to sharpen up your image and make it look pretty horrific at times. But if you were trying to make this like stop sign, this street sign a little bit more legible, then you could just sharpen that a little bit. And you're like, hey, now it has more detail over there than what I could see previously. So that's the handiness for that. The smudge tool, be careful with this one. Do not just start drawing because you might crash Photoshop because it's weirdly demanding. Smudge. I have like a super powerful computer and it still takes this long to do like a thing. I stopped clicking and now it's going to try to meet back over here. So be careful. Don't just start drawing on the screen. But anyway, that smudges things, which can, you know, all of this can be handy at some point. The dodge tool. The dodge tool, I believe it brightens up the highlights of an image. And so you'll see that it just makes everything a lot brighter. All of the white parts of it are going to get brighter. And I mean, I guess it does it to everything, but yeah, maybe it increases the exposure or something. I don't know exactly what it does, but it does brighten up that spot. And then the burn tool does the opposite. It actually darkens all of it. And yep, don't use the burn tool just like the other one. Just like blur and sharpen, don't use dodge and burn to correct each other because that's just going to look really ugly. Sponge tool decreases the saturation. It tries to soak up the colors of whatever you are using it on, and so you'll make that building all black and white. Don't do this to make a black and white image, but you know, again, it can be used for something. The pen tool, not so much like the brush and the pencil. The pen tool actually is like creates these anchor points, and then you can create different shapes. Hit escape twice to undo that, or you can also just Control Z back. Yeah, and so that's what that does. And the rest of the tools in the set, the freeform pen tool, it clicks and, that's not it, is it? Freeform. It clicks and drags, and then you come back and link it up and you'll see that little circle back there, just like everything else. That's a selection kind of tool, and it'll auto create all of your anchor points in that area. The pen curvature, the curvature pen tool, it does all the same things except it creates curves. Yep, that's what it is, partner. Neato, right? Yep. And the add anchor point, so if I had a pen line, these are all anchor points. You could add your anchor point to it, and you could subtract anchor points by deleting them with this. Boop, boop. And if I had a straight line, then like you'll notice some of these, they curve. If you create these, you'll have two different little things to help curve it. But if I just had this one, when I go to select things, then they have no little curvy bits. And so the last thing, the convert anchor point tool, adds those curvy bits to it so that you can keep on messing with it. Neato. All right, text, horizontal type. Lets you type horizontally. This is the sky. Neat. You can use the move tool to like rotate that. Oops. Hit escape if you mess up. Again, little thing or that thing. But yeah, if you hold shift, you can rotate it at specific angles, and you can do that. Or you can, if you want different D type of thing, then you type tis the sky, and then I can do a vertical add-on. That's a thing also. The type mask tool, whenever you type, uses your text, and so we'll do the horde. These are the same, basically the same things, except when you type it and you hit enter. No, not enter. Don't hit enter because it's just going to it's going to go down. Hit this check mark up here, and you'll get a selection. And then if you were to make a mask, it'll just do that with the selection. So again, can be super handy, but we will talk about that later. Control D to deselect, just like everything else. Path selection tool. So I have my pen tool, and I've created 2 points on my board, and then I press A for the shortcut. Path selection just lets me select the entire thing, and then the direct selection will let me select individual points and move those around. You can hit delete to get rid of the path also if you have it selected like that. Rectangle tool creates a rectangle using your foreground color. Bam, bangarang, rounded rectangle, rounded edges on that rectangle. Yep. Ellipse tool, same thing, uses your foreground, didn't really give it a chance. Polygon, you can select the amount of sides up here, but you can do triangles, and you could do 20 sides. Boom. Nailed it. I forget what that isometric drawn. Line tool creates lines. If I hit escape, you'll see that it is a yellow line right there. And you can also change like the thickness of that line by using your move tool, and boom. Whoa. I mean, that just actually scaled it. Oops, all together. But I could hold shift and then just scale that. Edge. And a custom shape tool. Up here, you have different little shapes. You have different little flowers and stuff like that. If you hold it, I'm sure that you can make your own shapes by using the pen tool, because that's what these are. These are made out of pen paths, and I'm sure if I use the direct selection, I can change it and customize that shape to my liking. But yes, it is not like the pen tool. It just has default shapes that are created from up there. You've got your hand tool. We talked about this earlier, and for some reason it's not really working. Guess I have to be zoomed in more. And the rotate tool. This rotates the entire artboard. So if you're working on like a tablet or something and you're doing a little 2-finger shift to do that, your image is going to save just as it was. This is just changing the view, the angle of all of it. And so it's not going to save like diagonal. Everything you're working with is still going to be just as it was, unlike if you use the move tool and then rotate your entire image that way. Same thing where if you use like the crop, and where does crop go? You can rotate your crop, and that actually rotates your artboard doing it that way. But yes, don't use the rotate tool for any of that stuff. It's just to rotate your own person. You can't undo it either. You can hold shift, and then it'll get you the right angles to get back to it that way. Magnifying glass, we talked about this earlier. Whoa, zoom in, edit toolbar. This is how I created a little shortcut for blur, because normally it has nothing, and so you can tweak the shortcuts for it. I could shove this into a different category. Sometimes I feel like the paint bucket tool should be with Eyedropper, because that's how it used to be, but then they added all of these funky things to Eyedropper, and maybe I want these in an entirely different section, so I could create their own little section for that stuff. Be careful, you can't undo it. Yeah, so that's what that is. Oops, I don't actually know where. Yep, just like that. Restore defaults, perfect. Yep, and so you can change everything you want in that little bad boy. This, if you click these little things, it takes it back to black and white. You can switch using those arrows, and this is a masking tool. So using black and white and your brush, you can create a mask, and white just ends up erasing your mask. Why is that not doing anything? There we go. And then black draws on a mask. We'll talk about all of that later. Next up, this is the last thing. This just changes the mode to full screen or not full screen. You can hit F to also do it. and you can hover over here to get your toolbar back. And that's it. That's everything. Thanks for watching. I really hope this didn't take too long, and I hope that I can figure out a way to make it more interesting during the editing process if I can. But that is everything that you need to know for your toolbar in Photoshop. As we go on through tutorials, we're going to learn more and more, and I'm going to try to do it in a way that I think is going to be most helpful for you to learn. So like next time we're going to do masking, which is selecting something and then turning it into a mask, which is just later on you can change your selection and tweak it and do things like that. And I'm hoping to go through this entire image, this exact image, and we're going to turn all the asphalt into grass and make this like a little grassy hill that's going down so that it looks a little bit less like it is. Oh gosh. Oops, gotta undo that. Anyway, yeah, I'm just hoping to make it look really pretty and nice little fantasy kind of land. So we'll try to change up some things over there and use masks to do that. So again, thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you want to see more Photoshop tutorials and things like that. You can leave a comment in this video, not other comments, not other videos, because a lot of them are made for kids. But on this video, you can leave a comment if you want to see something else super specific. And yep. Talk to you guys later. Bye.